Most teams pull a player when his heart isn't right. The Stars cleared him. The doctors signed off. The monitor was on his chest every shift. Then his heart stopped on the bench and a coach was screaming for a doctor in the stands. Rules existed. Rules weren't enough. The arena saved him. The system didn't. Before the bench, before the surgery, before any of it, Rich Peverley was a kid from Guelph, Ontario, who nobody in the NHL wanted. The draft years came and went. His name was never called. He went to St. Lawrence University instead, played 4 years of college hockey, and waited for someone to notice. When his college career ended in 2004, he still had no NHL contract. So he signed with the South Carolina Stingrays in the ECHL, 2 leagues below the NHL, where the pay and the conditions are nothing like the NHL. That is where his career started. Not in a rookie camp, not on a prospect list. In the ECHL. He worked his way up to the AHL. First, a single game with the Portland Pirates, then the Milwaukee Admirals. He led that team in points midway through the 2006-07 season, and Nashville finally signed him on January 17, 2007. He was 24 years old. Most NHL prospects make their debut at 19 or 20. Peverley got there 5 years late. He stuck. He was claimed off waivers by Atlanta on January 10, 2009, traded to Boston on February 18, 2011. And on June 15, 2011, he had his name engraved on the Stanley Cup as a member of the Boston Bruins. The undrafted kid from the ECHL was a champion. Then came Dallas. On July 4, 2013, Boston traded him to the Stars in the Tyler Seguin deal. Peverley arrived as a third-line center, a face-off specialist, the kind of player coaches trust on the penalty kill. By season's end on March 10th, he had won 60.1% of his face-offs that season. He was 31 years old, in his prime, and finally being paid like an NHL regular. That was the contract, the career, the thing he had spent 12 years building from the bottom of professional hockey. Then the physical happened. September 2013, before training camp. The Stars ran the standard preseason physicals on every player, and one of the screens flagged something on Peverley's. An EKG came back unusual. They ran more tests. The diagnosis was atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat that, in the wrong moment, could stop the heart entirely. The team sent him for a procedure called a cardiac ablation, where a surgeon scars a small section of the heart muscle to block the bad electrical signal. The procedure has a short recovery time. It does not, by itself, end an NHL career. Peverley was cleared. He came back. He played 62 games before March 10th. He scored 7 goals. He won faceoffs. He wore a heart monitor for every game and every practice, a quiet condition the team had attached to his clearance, and the doctors reviewed the readings. The week before in Columbus, he felt strange after the game. Something flickering in his chest. He couldn't get on the team plane. The doctors checked him. He was held out of the next game and watched from the press box. They cleared him again. He played on March 6th. He played on March 8th. He felt fine. March 10th was his 3rd game back. 6 minutes and 23 seconds into the first period, he stepped off the ice after his shift and sat down on the bench. He turned to the trainer beside him. Then, his head went sideways and his body slumped onto the lap of Jamie Benn. The man who had spent 12 years climbing into the league had just had his heart stop in front of 18,000 people 6 minutes into a Monday night game in Dallas. What was supposed to happen next was written down. The NHL had a document for it, a protocol, a specific sequence of steps that the team doctors and trainers were trained to follow. The document existed. It was not enough. The document was called the NHL Emergency Medical Standards 2013-14 edition. Every arena was required to follow it. The rules sounded reasonable on paper. 2 team physicians at every home game. At least one of those physicians had to be within 50 feet of the benches at all times. Every arena had to have an AED available at the home team bench and on the player level. There was a designated medical room, a planned route to the hospital, contact numbers posted in both team areas. That was the floor the league was operating on when Peverley collapsed. Now look at what the documents did not require. It did not require the on-bench doctor to be a trained emergency specialist. The two team physicians could be an orthopedic surgeon and an internal medicine doctor. Both qualified. Neither one specifically trained to recognize and respond to a cardiac arrest in under 60 seconds. It didn't require the AED to be on the bench itself. It required the AED to be on the player level. That can mean down the hallway. It can mean 50 feet away. In a cardiac arrest, those 50 feet are the difference between a save and a funeral. It did not require regular drills. The medical staff was supposed to know the plan. There was no mandate that they rehearse it. The standard, written and signed off on by the league, was that a doctor be near. An AED exists somewhere in the building, and a hospital should be on the route map. Near, exist, mapped. Those are the verbs the protocol used. What saved Peverley was not the protocol. It was the people. Dave Zeiss and Craig Lowry were the Stars' athletic trainers. When Peverley slumped, they were on him in seconds. They pulled him off the bench through a tunnel because the bench itself, fixed in place, didn't give them room to work. They got him into a hallway behind the rink. Dr. Gil Salazar from UT Southwestern was the team physician on hand. He started chest compressions immediately. He inserted an IV. He put an AED on Peverley's chest and delivered a single shock. The heart restarted on the first attempt. Peverley's heart had been stopped for approximately 2 minutes. When he came back to consciousness, the first thing he asked Lindy Ruff,
"How much time left in the first period?"
He thought he was still going back out for his next shift. He survived because Zeiss and Lowry were fast. He survived because Salazar was there and knew what to do. He survived because the AED was close enough this time in this arena on this night. That is not a system working. That is a system getting lucky. The two are not the same thing. And the league knew the difference, because 9 years earlier, almost the exact same scene had played out on a different bench. November 21st, 2005. Joe Louis Arena, Detroit. The Red Wings were playing the Nashville Predators in the first period. Yuri Fisher was 25 years old. Czech defenseman, 6'5", drafted 25th overall in 1998. He had won a Stanley Cup with the Red Wings 3 years earlier. He had finished a shift, sat down on the bench, and his heart stopped. The team doctor was Tony Colucci. He had been monitoring Fisher's heart for years. Back in 2002, a routine screening had picked up an abnormality, and Colucci had warned Fisher about what could happen. So when Fisher went down on November 21st, Colucci knew immediately what he was looking at. Fisher was unconscious for 6 minutes. Colucci performed CPR. He used an AED. The shock worked. Fisher was rushed to Detroit Receiving Hospital and admitted. The game was stopped at 7 minutes 30 seconds of the first period. The Red Wings, the Predators, and the league office decided together to postpone the game. It was the first time in NHL history that a game had been postponed because of an injury. Fisher never played again. He had 2 more cardiac events in the following weeks while resting at home. By the end of the 2006-07 season, when his contract expired, the medical clearance to return was never going to come, and he was forced to retire. He took a job in Detroit's front office, where he still works today. Fisher has said this in interviews many times. His collapse was, in his own words, a wake-up call for the league. The NHL changed its protocol because of what happened on his bench. Here is what the change actually was. Before Fisher, AEDs were recommended. Doctors were generally on hand. There was no specific document mandating the details. After Fisher, AEDs in close proximity, a doctor is required to be within 50 feet of the benches. That is it. That is the upgrade Fisher's collapse produced. From recommended to within 50 feet. From generally on hand to in close proximity. The words changed. The actual response capability barely moved. And the league had been warned twice more. Once 7 years earlier, once 3 years later. In May 1998, Chris Pronger took a slap shot to the chest during a playoff game against Detroit and went down. The condition is called commotio cordis. A direct blow to the chest at the wrong millisecond of a heartbeat can stop the heart. Pronger survived. His heart restarted on its own without defibrillation. The lesson was already on the table by 2005. Then, on October 13, 2008, in Russia, the KHL learned the lesson the worst way possible. Alexei Cherepanov was 19 years old, a New York Rangers prospect playing for Avangard Omsk. He collapsed on the bench during a game against Vityaz Chekhov. There was no working AED in the arena. The on-site ambulance had left earlier in the night. He died. The story was reported around the world. Every league within a hockey rink heard about it. The NHL heard about it. The lesson was simple. A bench collapse, untreated for even a few minutes, kills. By March 10, 2014, the NHL had Pronger from 1998, Fisher from 2005, Cherepanov from 2008. 3 separate cases, 7 years apart, 3 years apart, where a player's heart had stopped or nearly stopped on a bench or on the ice. 3 opportunities to write a real protocol. What they had instead was a document that said, within 50 feet and in close proximity. That was the floor. Peverley collapsed on the floor. So what did it take to lift it? Not Pronger, not Fisher, not Cherepanov. It took one more. After March 10, 2014, the league reviewed what had happened in Dallas. The protocol was rewritten in the months and seasons that followed. Here is what the new document said. 3 physicians at every home game, not 2. 2 ambulances are stationed on site, not 1. AEDs are not just on the player level, but at every bench, every game, every practice. Removable bench sections, so that medical staff could pull a player off the bench without dragging him through a tunnel. Mandatory cardiac drills before the start of every season, with team physicians, athletic trainers, paramedics, and arena security all participating together. And the change that mattered most. The on-bench doctor could no longer be just any qualified physician. The doctor on hand was now required to be an active, currently practicing specialist in emergency management. A doctor who handles cardiac arrests as part of their actual job. Not an orthopedist on rotation. An emergency specialist on duty. 3 doctors instead of 2, AEDs at every bench, removable benches, mandatory drills, emergency specialists. Each one of those could have been mandated in 2006. None of them were. The league waited. They waited through Fisher's forced retirement. They waited through Cherepanov's death in Russia. They waited through every cardiac flag that came across the desk of NHL operations between 2005 and 2014. The protocol stayed at within 50 feet. Then Peverley collapsed under it. And within months, every change that had been ignored for 9 years was suddenly possible. The proof that the rewrite worked is on the record now. February 11th, 2020. Honda Center, Anaheim. Jay Bouwmeester, the St. Louis Blues defenseman, finished his shift in the first period and sat down on the bench. Vince Dunn and Alex Pietrangelo, sitting next to him, saw what was happening within seconds, exactly as they had been trained to do under the new protocol. Ray Barile, the Blues head trainer, was on Bouwmeester immediately. The onside ambulance was already staged. The emergency physician was on the bench, not 50 feet away. The AED was at hand. Bouwmeester survived. He was given an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, a small device sewn under the skin, and he never played again. But he walked away. Weeks later, in his first public statement, he said this.
I mean, it happened in the absolute best place that it could happen because the protocols that they have in place and the way that people responded so quickly.
That sentence is only possible because of March 10th, 2014. The rule that saved Bouwmeester in 2020 did not exist when Peverley collapsed. It existed because Peverley collapsed. The system that kept Bouwmeester alive was built out of what almost killed Peverley. That is how player safety actually moves in professional sports. Not through foresight, through funerals and near funerals. Every league does it this way. The NHL is not the exception. It just has the paper trail. The man who started this video, the kid from Guelph who went undrafted and rode buses through the ECHL and won a Stanley Cup and finally got his shot in Dallas, is alive today because the people in that arena on March 10th were better than the rule that put them in charge of his life. The rule got better afterward. He is the reason it did. Peverley still works in hockey. He runs a charity called Pevs Protects that puts AEDs into community rinks across Canada and the United States. The kind of buildings where there is no team doctor, no ambulance staged outside, no protocol at all. He decided the lesson was bigger than the league. The question for you is this: should a player ever have to be the reason a rule exists? Drop your answer in the comments. If this video meant something to you, super thanks helps me keep digging into stories just like this one. And if you want the next one the moment it lands, hit subscribe. There's more coming, and you'll want to be here for it.